What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Joseph and Moon Show. I am Terence, host of Das.
This is Stefan Munch right here with you, and of course, it's gonna be another new and exciting episode, Joseph and Moon Show.
Okay, so this week you'll notice that I'm decked in a bate, he's decked in a bate, and we're coming upon the precipice of our 63rd anniversary. Of course, it is Hari Kebangsaan 2020, and this
Black
means
flag.
that we will be flying our flags. You should be flying your flags right now, in fact, all year round, in celebration of National Day. However, there is, something about the celebration year after year that I've noticed, a slight maybe dilution in the reason for doing so. What do we love about this country and what makes us Malaysian?
That's right. Every year, as you mentioned, we've been celebrating it, but we tend to lose, lose focus on the main purpose of the celebration itself.
I mean, patriotism, is it still a word that you use to describe yourself today? In our early days in school, I do remember having to recite the creed or Rukun Negara,
And the five tenets.
the five principles of the Rukun Negara, and we all memorize this by heart. Today, we find that a lot of Malaysians don't really remember what they recited in primary school.
I don't know if they still do it, but I suppose they do.
I hope they do. But the reason behind what you recite, what are you reciting? What is the purpose? Do you actually know?
Yeah.
Do you?
It's just a set of words
Right.
memorized in the head in
Yes.
case we get tested for it.
So I think there's a lot of contention for each and every one of those tenets today. I mean, Twitter is so rife with conversation. People are talking about each tenet, and in a way that I feel has caused a little bit of disunity. So we have got someone in the house today who is a national icon. I mean, when we talk about national icons, there are only very few people on that list, bro.
Yep, and one of them is right here next to us, right? He's the legend himself, the one of the national heroes that keeps us in line, keeps reminding us, and without him, I think we would be even more lost, right?
So to give you some context, right? He served the country for 52 years, he just told us off camera. 52 years, and he began serving the nation at the age of 23. I don't know, what were you doing when you were 23?
Monkeying around.
I think we were selling charity greeting cards.
Yeah. On the roadside.
We were working in a cyber cafe.
Cyber cafe, coffee shops.
Yeah, we were doing things that,
man.
that were like of service to us, not so much the nation.
Yeah, no nation building work done by us at 23.
So basically what I'm trying to say is from the get-go, from a very young Lee Lam Thye back then, now Sri Lee Lam Thye, he has had this
Well-deserved title.
this desire to basically serve the nation.
And guess what? Today he's not stopping.
He's not stopping.
And we are bringing him here to share it with all of you as well. Not to lose focus on what those five tenets are. Really zoom into the meaning and get into the spirit.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the one and only Sri Lee Lam Thye. Well, guys, as promised, in the house today on the Joseph and Moon Show, we have the one and only Sri Lee Lam Thye.
Sri, it's an honor. Welcome. Thank you for doing this in the midst of all this COVID-19 pandemic and all that, right? Obliged, and he came just to send out the message on this very crucial period of the year.
Also, I want to thank you, Sri, for doing this because I don't think you've ever been interviewed in a setting like this before.
Out, not in true studio.
Well, these are Terence and this Stefan. To the both of you, let me say thank you for bringing me here to your Moon Show.
Joseph and Moon Show.
Well, I do not know as to whether I deserve to be called a national icon. But what I've done is the fact that I have contributed 52 years, to national service. I started at the age of 23 when I worked for the trade union, National Union of Commercial Workers. At that time, it was supposed to be the third largest trade union in the country.
This is back in 19...
That was back in 1968. 68, you know.
68.
And then after a stint in trade unionism for a year, then came 1969 when we had the general election. And of course I was proposed as a candidate to stand for elections on the DAP, this ticket. So I stood and, at that time I was a young man, and of course I still remember when I first got on stage to make a speech, I was in fact shivering, to be very frank with you. Because, I had never faced such a huge crowd, about 2,000 to 3,000 people, standing there, just listening to this young man, at that time I wasn't a man, this boy, this young lad,
So, the youngest politician back then.
Yeah, exactly. So I was standing there making a speech and all that. Anyway, as I said, with the support of the people, I got elected. And from then on, then I started to serve as a people's elected these representatives. For the first 5 years, as a state assembly, I stood in the state assembly for Selangor. At that time, KL was still part of this Selangor. It wasn't federal territory yet. And then in '74, then I was proposed to stand for Parliament. So from '74 right up to 1990, so I served 4 terms as an MP. Well, after I decided to retire from politics, I still wanted to serve the country in other capacities. So I remember the long list of NGOs that I joined, and one of them was actually this Pemadam. Pemadam at that time, it was a very big organization formed to help in the fight against drug abuse. Of course, largely was involved with a lot of educational programs, creating awareness, reaching out, to the community, talking to them, about the dangers of drug abuse, meeting with the parents and so on. Yeah, after politics. That was from 1992 onwards. So then after that, there were a list of other NGOs that I got myself involved, dealing with the environment, work safety and so on, which actually there was much later on. Later on. In 1993, I was also involved with the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation, MCPF, and even until now, I'm still with the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation. And then, of course, the NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, from 1992 until last year when I retired, So there were a lot of these things that I was doing, but largely I would say I was doing all this, I think, for the sake, of the community, for the sake of the nation. Because I felt that although, I decided to retire from politics, I could still, use my experience, to serve the community in other ways. And this is the reason why I decided to get myself actively involved, in all this, what I call it, national service. So on looking back, as you have rightly said, Terence, I have given 52 years. Well, as to whether I could be classified or described as a national icon, I leave it to the people to judge. Because I think the people are the best judge. I cannot just tell everybody, I'm a national icon when you are not, So I'm very careful about that. But anyway, if you feel that I deserve it, well, I just accept it lah.
Well
I leave it to you.
Your tales of you as a member of parliament and even as a state assemblyman running around with a typewriter, writing letters to help people get things done.
You see, I was rather.
That
You see, when I was a serving politician,
Right.
it was rather very unique in the sense that I used to bring my mobile typewriter around.
Yes.
Everywhere I go, I used to bring along my mobile typewriter, and also I've got a mobile office in my car. It was just a Datsun. A Datsun
1-2 wide.
where at the back of the booth, if I open my booth, people are surprised. I've got a chair there which I take out to sit when I serve people by the roadside, by the roadside, or for example any place. If I go and visit, say a squatter area, I will, I will bring the chair along. I can be seated. I also have, just a table, a small table, which can be folded up. And I bring it out, and then I can set up my office, and then I have all kinds of forms there, forms for application of hawkers licenses, forms for application of citizenship, identity cards, birth certificate, everything is there. So much so that the people say, well, we don't need to go to the government office lah. Everything we want is with Lee Lam Thye.
I've never seen that with mine.
Exactly. I'm scratching my head thinking, my member of parliament sometimes disappears. I don't even know where his office is.
And then not only that, and then I also work very very closely with the authorities,
Right.
because I believe that although I was in the opposition, but it did not mean that I've got to antagonize or just to have a confrontation with the civil servant. So I work with the civil servant, and in particular I work with the mayor. I serve so many mayors, and some or other, I was able to get their cooperation, to get their help, and as a result, who benefited? The people benefited, because I was able to get things done. That is very important.
Because you have good EQ, instead of antagonizing the public officers, you don't get results for antagonizing them. So you do the other way around, right?
So,
and you get results.
So anyway, this is all a past lah. So today, as I said, I'm here. Maybe lah. I think you want to query me lah, or you want to bring up certain issues of national interest.
Absolutely.
And I'm indeed, as I said, very pleased to be here, and I will certainly do my best lah.
So unfortunately, we're going to have to go back in time a little bit, Tan Sri, to
fine.
the 70s, or rather 1969 to be exact, where an episode in our nation's history that we talk about today to remind ourselves of what could happen if this country breaks down into disharmony. So at the precipice of that, and having coming out of May 13, 1969, we forged the Rukun Negara. Can you talk to us about the ingredients that went into the Rukun Negara?
Well, the important thing I need to discuss today is what actually gave birth to the Rukun Negara in 1970. Now, my answer is this: that the Rukun Negara came into being in August 1970, and I remember it was on Independence Day. The Rukun Negara was officially launched and officiated by the 4th Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Now, what is this Rukun Negara all about? Now, as you have mentioned, 1969 was indeed a very traumatic year, I think, for the country, for the nation, because I still remember, because that was my first election that I stood, and I still remember very vividly, May 13. May 13, 1969 was a day which will be etched in the minds of Malaysians for a long time. And for me, as one who got elected in that year, it was certainly that something that I would certainly never fail to remember. Now, on that particular day, racial riots broke out in Kuala Lumpur, and as a result of this tragedy, I think Malaysia was very often mentioned by many people. I think especially the historians that was a day when, as a result of the 1969 elections, when certain political party was not able to accept the fact that they had to face that situation, and as a result, it gave rise to a lot of unhappiness. It gave rise to those who were in the political party at that time, that it was something that they were not prepared to accept. So then came the riots, as I mentioned, and it was because of the May 13 riots. At that time, the then Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman Saputra Al-Haj decided to form a National Goodwill and Consultative Council, which was headed by the Deputy Prime Minister, Abdul Razak. The National Goodwill or Consultative the Council was made up of 67 eminent persons who came from various strata of society, who came from the different regions of the country, and they sat down, they discussed ways and means on how to prevent a recurrence of that May 13 tragedy. And of course, the immediate task that was given to the National Goodwill and Consultative Council at that time was to restore the situation to this normalcy. Because there were the riots, I think there were a lot of these disturbances, and in fact, this Parliament at that time, I still remember, Parliament was dissolved, and what was in place was a National Operation Council, which was chaired by Abdul Razak himself. And of course, the National Operation Council was given full powers to manage the country, in the absence of Parliament. And so, after intensive discussion by the Council, the Consultative Council, made up of 67 eminent persons drawn from all races, it gave birth to this Rukun Negara. Basically, this Rukun Negara has 5 important tenets. First is the first tenet is a belief in God. Number 2 is loyalty to the king and country. Number 3, the supremacy of the Constitution. Number 4, the rule of law. And number 5, good social behavior and morality. Now, what is the purpose of these 5 tenets? The purpose of these 5 tenets is to help realize 5 important objectives for the country, which the Council believed that they would be able to use the Rukun Negara and the 5 tenets, or the 5 basic principles, to be the guiding light for the nation, to be the foundation for unity building in our multiracial, multicultural country.
Right, so Tan Sri, I think you mentioned rightly a little bit about objectives. So in school, we only kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, kesetiaan kepada raja negara, keluhuran, perlembagaan, kedaulatan undang-undang, kesopanan dan kesusilaan.
We just memorize it by heart.
Yeah.
But there is a part before that.
There, objectives.
Yeah.
Please, let's zoom into it.
Well, the thing is, as I said, with the 5 principles or the tenets that were decided by the council, there are 5 important objectives to be met. Number 1, as I said, is in regard to creating national unity, building national unity. Number 2 is to ensure a democratic way of life, Number 3, creating a just society with shared prosperity. Number 4, ensuring a liberal approach towards the cultural traditions of all the races in the country. And of course, number 5, creating a progressive society based on science and technology. So these are very clearly defined objectives of the Rukun Negara. And from my point of view, now if these 5 tenets are to be put into daily practice, if they are to be embraced and be part of our way of life,
By everyone.
I'm sure we will be able to achieve all the 5 objectives because these were clearly discussed and thought out by a group of 67 eminent persons in the country, and they were from all the races. They come from all the different parts of the country, and they felt that this is something that should be this a panacea to end any future form of problems in the country, to prevent a repetition, a recurrence of the May 13th racial riots.
I would say it's very well crafted. Right? It's still relevant and well crafted until this very day.
Yeah.
But we can see the situation of what it's like today. But back then, in 1970s, the years after the Rukun Negara was formed, we weren't there to witness the effects. So maybe you can share with us, how was it like?
Yeah, I think
back then,
I
after
certainly
that?
would like to say something on this because you see, at that time, 1970, as I said, I was already a politician, and I subscribe. I believed, in all the 5 tenets, because I think these are very basic, these are fundamental things, which I think every normal human being, irrespective of race, color, or creed, would be able to accept. For example, like this belief in God, loyalty to the king and country. I'm sure nobody is going to dispute all this and all that, you see, and all the others. Now, but the important thing is this. What I noticed was this, that from 1970, when it was proclaimed by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, it was given a lot of attention. It was given a lot of media coverage. The various the ministries, they made sure that they would publicize, all these 5 tenets, the Rukun Negara, to their civil servants and so on. But unfortunately, as I said, was that it only the publicity, the coverage, the attention that it was given. To me, as far as I can recollect, it lasted for only less than 10 years. And after that, it dissipated. It dissipated in the sense that, the Rukun Negara was no longer given the due attention that it deserves. This is very important. Now, the Rukun Negara was, I would say, in some these quarters, was just forgotten. Nobody, ever this, mention this, for example, in important meetings, in conferences, you know. And what they have was this, it only was talked about in the schools because it is something, you know, that is learned in school. And that is the reason why, you know, you have many students, you know, who are very good at memorizing this. And I tell you, and even, you know, over a number of years, you know, when I went to the school, I talked to the students, and they all impressed me, you know. They all impressed me with their citation of the Rukun Negara. My God, I tell you, it's all in their lips, you know. But you see, when I took the trouble, I sat down with the students, I asked them one by one. Unfortunately, the result was disappointing because other than, you know, belief in God, loyalty to the king and country, for the rest, they have no idea. I asked them, I said, how come you are so fluent? Oh, he said, because we were told by our teacher that it is something that we must know. So they decided to memorize it, but they were not educated, they were not told what each of the tenet means. This is the most unfortunate part of it. I'm very frank. So as I said, for the first 10 years, a lot of the publicity was given, coverage was given, a lot of talk about Rukun, but after that, nobody mentioned. And that's the reason why, as I said, I warmly welcome the recent statement by our Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, when he announced that the cabinet had decided, the President Cabinet had decided to rekindle the spirit of the Rukun Negara, and they have decided to commemorate its 50th anniversary. This year, 2020 happened to be the 50th anniversary of the Rukun Negara.
Yeah, just did my calculations.
And the Prime Minister announced that it is going to be a core agenda for the government. Very important, a core agenda for the government. So as I said, of course, when this was published, I was the first to come up with a statement, you know, on behalf of my foundation, the National Unity Foundation, to welcome the PM statement, and said that it is high time, I think, for the country and for the government must take the lead. Government must set the example to talk about the Rukun Negara, to give life, you know, back to the Rukun Negara, to rekindle it, and at the same time to ensure that there will be a series of programs and activities that will follow to get the nation, to get the people to embrace it and to make it as part of their way of life.
Tan Sri, the world is a very different place today than when it was in the 70s. And although the Rukun Negara was given so much attention and coverage on media, I do believe people in the 70s, they didn't have that many options pertaining to media. So they would have to watch the national broadcast, they would have to read the national
newspaper.
But today, the world has opened up in a way like never before. We are bombarded with all sorts of ideas and ideologies. And by and large, there are even Malaysians today who challenge the first principle of the Rukun Negara, kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, and say, what if I disbelieve? So does that make me any less a Malaysian? What do you say to people who would like to challenge the 5 tenets of the Rukun Negara?
Well, in the first place, I certainly feel that there is no basis whatsoever, I think, for them to challenge. But of course, we are living in just a democratic society.
Liberal society, as one of the objectives stated.
Yeah. And of course, as I said, we cannot stop people from giving comments, you know, from making even negative remarks, you know, I think about something which is so fundamental to the country. But I believe that by and large, now this is based on my experience and my feel of things. When I'm on the ground, you know, when I talk to the ordinary people in the streets, I think by and large they are asking why is it that the 5 tenets of the Rukun Negara are not being put into practice today. And sometimes they say, well, the government, you know, talks so much about the Rukun Negara, and they even mentioned now the Prime Minister has spoken they wanted to commemorate the 50th anniversary. So the important thing is say, okay, how are they going to commemorate it? Now, what are they going to do? And at the end of the day, as to whether it is going to be just rhetoric, and there will be no what they call it, concrete action to be taken to really explain, to really make the people understand the 5 objectives of the Rukun Negara. But of course, for all those who challenge these objectives, of course, it is entirely up to them. If they don't see the reason, if you don't see the logic of having the Rukun Negara, but these are the very people who also at the same time they do not have the answer on how we can bring about a united nation. Maybe they like to take to task all these things, but if you were to ask them, okay, what is your alternative? Now, what better alternative do you have, than what is mentioned in the Rukun Negara? I don't think they have. But as I said, I mean, these are things that we cannot avoid. I think we have to accept it. It's part of the liberal society they are talking about. But of course, I think to me, I mean, I belong to the older generation of Malaysians. And of course, as I said, whenever I talk about this Rukun Negara, I'm very passionate about it because I believe in it. I subscribe to it and I practice it because to me, as I said, for example, this belief in God. Believe in God, yes. I'm a Buddhist. I have my own religious teachings. And I think all the teachings of all the religions in the country, they teach people to do good. To do good. And it is very, very important. So if for someone to say that, they want to challenge the belief in God, then I think it is something that to me, I think it's something that is a bit unbecoming. But of course, as I said, I'm not going to go into engage in an argument with them. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the first tenet of this Rukun Negara is very important, and that has something to do with how are we going to build, good Malaysians who are responsible, Malaysians, who are disciplined, Malaysians who are able to be guided by good moral values, which I think are very important today. So to me, as I said, this is what I believe in.
All right. Now, Tan Sri, let's come back to the specifically the first objective of the Rukun Negara, which is to foster national harmony.
National unity.
National unity, that's right. So, in this department, I wanted to know what went wrong, because we used to hear from the older generation, our father's generation. They used to say that they used to be so harmonious in school. They have friends of all races until since young, since old. They used to play together, do things together.
Even us, I mean, our generation, we've been friends for 30 years. We grew up together. We grew up in the same neighborhood, and we have friends from all different races.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing in the same field.
But I heard the generation before us is even
closer
to each other.
Yeah.
So maybe you can comment about that.
Yeah,
how true is that back then, and how different it is now?
I think to put it in this perspective, I would I mentioned me as an example. During my school days, there was in the 60s, in the 60s and in the 50s. In fact, there was no such thing as what we call it, racial discrimination of uniform. I did remember during my school days, I had in my classroom, students from all the various races, Malays, Chinese, Indians, and I think we mixed very well. We became very good friends, and there was no such thing as being very conscious of one another's race and so on. And all of us, I would say, were color blind. Very important. All of us were colorblind, and we never regarded each other along racial lines. You know, we just treated each other as friends and as close friends. You know, as students we staying together, as Malaysians, as good human beings, and that's about all. But I think what was very unfortunate, I would say, is this lah. And this is what I experienced during my days when I was in politics. Even during my days, my early days in politics, it was still all right. Even the politicians, you know, I think when they started to talk in the state assembly, you know, I think although, well, they had just a different agenda, but the fact is this, you could sense it that they still were very tolerant. They accepted, I think, whatever remarks, whatever comments we make about the weaknesses, you know, of government policies and so on and so forth. Now, the subject of National Unity Day, let me say, is indeed, I would say, a very major challenge in our country today. It's a major challenge for the simple reason that if we were to do, say, to undertake a study, you know, of, say, if it is a score of 1 to 10, for example, now, at which number are we in from a score of 1 to 10 in terms of this unity? I mean, my assessment is this. I think the most that we can get is only about 5.
Today.
5 today. And there's another 5 just to go. Of course, you can never achieve a perfect situation, you know. There are bound, but of course, this issue of race, this issue of racial discrimination is not something that is only unique in Malaysia. You have it, I mean, in other countries all over the world. But I think for us in Malaysia, I think we started off very well in the sense that we accepted each other. This very well. And we never, during my early days, they never played on the racial agenda, you know. But over the years, I think especially over the last 20 years or so, I would have noticed that if you were to go down to the ground, you talk to the people of different races. I don't think, you know, they are going to sound racist, because by and large, as I said, the people on the ground, you know, they can accept one another. Of course, there may be some who may not be, you know, very close and so on. But by and large, I think to the people on the ground, you talk to them, I think they all want peace, they all want harmony, they want a business to go on. They want the country to just survive, because their very survival depends on the nation's survival. But what happened was this, the most unfortunate part was that over the last 20 years or so, I would say that this racist, this agenda was actually pursued by politicians. Politicians with selfish disinterest, and especially politicians who are out to woo votes, you know, in the election, and they felt that the only way that they could get their particular race to support them is to play on the racial agenda, and because of this, as I said, because of the attitude and the approach taken by these politicians, as a result, even to a large extent, the people are being influenced. Their supporters are being influenced to the extent that they want to support them on the race agenda. So I think this is something that is very unfortunate. So the thing is this, as I said, if you leave it to the people, I think things should be all right. But if you leave it to the politicians, as I said, I don't think the politicians have really set the right example in terms of showing that they are the leaders of the country, in terms of showing that irrespective of race, you know, they are in fact the people whom the people are looking up to, to set the right example. But that example has not been set, very unfortunately, and this is the problem that we have today. So to come back to your question, I said, I think creating national unity in the country is indeed a major hurdle. It is a monumental task that we have to perform. And I said, because over the last since introduction, since the introduction of the Rukun Negara, we only talked about, we discussed it only for a period of 10 years or so, and after that, I mean, it was thrown to the wind, you know. I mean, it was not mentioned at all. So all the 5 tenets, you know, were actually not, you know, on the agenda of the politicians. They were not interested in all this. They were more interested in playing on the racial agenda in order to secure racial support for them. And this is the most unfortunate part of it. And this result has led to what I call the polarization. The country, I would say, today is this polarized along the lines of race and this religion. And how are we going to restore it? How are we going to repair it? I think this is something which I hope the present government has to think about. And I really feel that the Rukun Negara, if we were to put into practice, we keep on drumming into the heads of Malaysians. We want them to embrace it. We want them to implement it, to practice it. I think there may be a solution to the problem.
Well, not just the 5 tenets, but we need to look at the objectives that sometimes lost in our memorizing of the 5 tenets. We forget the objectives. And Tan Sri, you know, I wish that we could execute some kind of time warp quantum paradox, go back in time and get politicians like you to replace the current ones.
No, I think, I think, I think if I may, of course, nation building is not the job of the government alone.
Correct.
Nation building is, in fact, everyone's responsibility. I put it this way, everyone. And this is the reason why all the NGOs which, you know, I'm involved, I make sure that all of them, you know, will pay heed, you know, to the 5 tenets of the Rukun Negara. And for example, very recently, I recorded a message, you know, on behalf of the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation, where I spoke about, you know, about Independence Day. You know, on the 31st August 2020, we are going to commemorate 63rd anniversary of our nation. The Jalur Gemilang, the national flag will be up. This Rukun Negara, and then also the Negaraku, you know, which is our national song. I like to emphasize on all these things. And also one other thing which I want to share with you, which I'm doing very actively. Every time when I go to the school, for example, you know, I always try to infuse into my speech some elements about nation building, and that is to explain to the young this generation that it is very important that students, you know, especially the primary school students, secondary school students, that there's one thing that they must do. They must accept the fact that they must be colorblind. This is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And as I said, these are things which I believe in. But I think overall, as I said, there are 5 objectives. Even if you talk about the first objective, it is in fact a major hurdle. How we are going to achieve it, well, I think it is. And of course, the other, we talk about a democratic this way of life. I think this is also another issue. You know, there have been all kinds of comments and remarks, you know, made about the fact that you know, there is no democracy in the country, you know, and so on and so forth. So I would say to every one of the 5 objectives, they are bound, you know, to be there are challenges, there are hurdles. But I think these are things which I think we need to do. We need, I think, to tackle it as they come along. But it's very important. My purpose of being here today is really to talk about the Rukun Negara, because I personally feel that Rukun Negara, if we are honest, if each and every one of us, irrespective of who we are, irrespective of what race we belong to. The fact is this: we must all accept the fact that this is what was decided in 1970 after the May 13 riots, for the precise purpose of helping, to prevent another May 13 this tragedy. Because as I said, May 13 is something that is very tragic, and it is something that must not be allowed to repeat itself. And that can only be done, as I said, provided, as I said, the political leaders of our country, their followers, the people themselves are prepared to respond, according to the spirit of the Rukun Negara.
And so I just want to get your comment on one more contentious part that's making its rounds in social media today on Twitter. People are focused on the word liberal in the objectives, and they're misconstruing it to mean freedom, like absolute freedom. What is your take on the usage of the word liberal in the objectives of achieving our ultimate selves, a perfect nation? Where does that word liberal come in? What is its meaning?
Well, you see, I would expect that the word liberal can be open to all kinds of interpretations. Okay? Different people have different ways of interpreting it. But I think what is important is at the end of the day, I think there should be this common sense, common sense in the belief that although we want a liberal approach, to many things. For example, this liberal approach to government, the policies, government decisions, laws, and these legislations that the government are going to introduce, for example. But at the same time, while of course I think all of us we cherish our democratic way of life, because I think this democracy is something that we have been so used to. But of course, at the same time, we must not misuse. We must not misuse, or we must not abuse this democracy. To do things that are inimical to the interests of the nation. For example, when we talk about this liberal approach, yes, we want to be free, to express our views. Yes, under the Constitution, there is the freedom of expression. It's all stated. That's why this is one of the tenets, the supremacy of the Constitution, where it also dictates good governance, for the country in terms of laws and these legislations. But the important thing is this: although it says that the Constitution guarantees us, the freedom to practice our respective religion, it guarantees us the freedom to associate. We can form societies, form organization. It guarantees the freedom to express our views and so on. But all these, there's also just a condition to it, and that is, yes, you can be free, you can be liberal, to say whatever you're going to say, to do whatever you're going to do, but at the end of the day, also there are certain laws that you have got to conform to make sure that as a result of your expression, your liberal views, it will not lead to chaos. It will not lead to conflict and chaos and troubles in the country. I think this is very important, because I think this is something that overrides all the, as I said, all the expressions, all the provisions in the Constitution with regard to the freedom of speech and so on. So I think to all those, I think who want to remain to be free, there is nothing wrong. You have to give them that choice, but at the same time, as I mentioned, common sense. I think they must have that common sense to realize that, for example, if they are to be given a democratic way of life, they must not abuse that to destroy this democracy. I think this is very, very important. The democracy is for you, as I said, to put into practice, but at the same time, don't abuse it to the extent that you will destroy this democracy. You know, because it can be done. Because as I said, I certainly would not like to expect a repeat of May 13, when we all know that democracy was suspended, Parliament was suspended, and it was only ruled by the National Operation Council and NOC. It was NOC rule. No Parliament. The people elected representatives, they cannot go to Parliament, they cannot speak, they cannot voice their opinion. So I think this is something which the people have in mind. As I said, well, by all means, you know, I mean, say what you want to say, but within the confines, of law and order.
Yeah, you're right. Freedom of speech has its limits. For example, a very good example is this: you have the freedom to, you know, swing your arms wherever you want to swing them, as long as it does not hit someone. If it hits someone, then it becomes a punch. It becomes a crime. But until then, you have the freedom to swing your hands.
Exactly.
It's a good analogy. I don't know where he gets his philosophy from. Very nice one.
Anyway, Sri, talking about moving forward. Now, you know, you already mentioned the government is like rekindling this, you know, that's one of the good step forward. So what else can be done to, you know, move forward?
Yeah, the thing is this, as I said, again, the government must ensure that it is not just a rhetoric. Because, you know, we have been so used, you know, to the fact that, you know, the government is very fond of organizing all forms of these campaigns, you know, like you know, road safety, these campaigns, like you know, anti-drug abuse, this campaign. But you know, most of these, I would say, they end up as ceremonial. These are functions. You know, it's just a launch, you know, just a launch, and then with all the publicity, the fanfare, and then the minister will come and launch it, and to all the crowd there, they came, the invited guests, they all clap and all that. But after that, I mean, nothing was being done to really, you know, follow through as a follow-up. So I would say it's a good start. It's a good start for the PM to have announced that we are going to restore the Rukun Negara as the core agenda of government. Now, the word core agenda is very important. The core, you know, that is the main, just the pillar. Now, when you talk about agenda of the government, now, agenda here means, you know, it can be different forms of activities, of programs, because when you talk about the government, there are so many things that is being done by the government. So it is very important that for everything that they do, for example, even if the government wants to introduce new laws, to introduce legislation in Parliament, for example, I think even before they table the bill in Parliament, when the bill goes, even before it goes to the Attorney General, the chambers, they have to make sure that the contents of, you know, of the bill, you know, must have the input from the people through the process of consultation. It's very important, because we do not want to see laws and legislation passed without the due process of consultation from the rakyat, from the people. Because by and large, you know, laws and legislations are made for what? Are made for the country, benefit the country, are meant for the people. So since they are meant for the country and the people, it is only fair that the people must be given the opportunity to have their say. So this is something which I will really like to propagate, because I believe that if, for example, now a good example what they can do, if, for example, they have a very controversial bill, for example, now this is something that it can have a major impact, you know, on the people. Now, what I feel they should do is this: before they take the bill to the Parliament, I think they should set up what they call a parliamentary select committee, and the Parliamentary Committee made up of MPs from both the government and the opposition sitting together, and they can go all over the country to engage the people, to engage the NGOs, but not necessarily, because this can be done, for example, throughout the country according to different just the region. They can make announcement.
Okay.
Now we have in mind to propose
this.
such and such a bill in Parliament. Now we know that this is something that it can be this controversial, but we would like to listen to you. So get the people to go to the town hall. They can express their views, and these views can be noted down. So at least the respective the ministries concerned, they can actually go back and they can look at their draft again and see what the things that the people have expressed, and they should include them. So I think, you see, when you talk about the core of government, actually it is very, very important that if you were to follow the objectives, of the five tenets, it just brings back to first and foremost the question of national unity. Now, because why? Because you must enact policies. You must enact policies that can bring about unity in the country. Because you can pass a law, and that law itself is very controversial, and it ends up, instead of uniting the people, you are dividing the people. So this is something that they must avoid, you see. So again, as I said, this is the process of consultation. So I really hope, as I said, government has done the right thing. Well, you want to rekindle the spirit of the Rukun Negara. You want to ensure that all the five tenets, are being brought into play. Then you just make sure that you not only talk about it, but you have to implement it, and that is what I would say is a very primary concern, and that is to ensure that all this talk about this Rukun Negara is not this rhetoric, but it is something that the government sincerely believes in, and they want the people to be involved. And of course, as far as the people are concerned, I think if they are given an opportunity to express their views, I think they must come forward, because at the end of the day, if they don't show any interest, they are not bothered about it, then of course they cannot blame the authorities there. But you have brought in something which I never have a chance to have a say. So this process of Terence, the process of consultation is very important. This is also in line with I think the five tenets of the Rukun Negara.
Well, I hope someone from the government of the day is listening in and can actually take into consideration what Tan Sri has put forward. Tan Sri, we're on the precipice of Hari Kebangsaan 2020, the theme being Malaysia Prihatin. It has been a very challenging year for all Malaysians and also for the global citizens. What are your messages and your takeaways for this year's celebration of independence?
Yeah, I think as we all know, Malaysia will be celebrating the 63rd anniversary of its independence. And of course, this year when we commemorate Hari Kemerdekaan, we are commemorating this occasion under abnormal these circumstances. Sometimes I can even say we have to celebrate Hari Kemerdekaan under the new just a normal. This is largely because of the fact that we were very greatly impacted by the pandemic COVID-19, and we have been told that even though when we celebrate our Independence Day, we have to take full cognizance of the SOPs, standard operating procedures, which were made by the Ministry of Health to ensure that we will not do anything that will lead to a further spread of COVID-19. So what comes to my mind is this, that I think we have got a good theme for this year, which is Malaysia Prihatin, Malaysia Cares. And I think here again, as I said, when we talk about Malaysia Prihatin, saya rasa sangat penting ialah bahawa kita nak membuktikan bahawa kita benar-benar dapat membuktikan keprihatinan kepada rakyat. We have to really prove that we really care for the people. Well, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, the government has come out with various the packages, this prihatin, the penjana and all that, that are supposed to help the low income group to enable them to cope with the hardship that they are facing. But I think at the end of the day, I said this will not last this forever. And I think what is really important is the fact that the government must really do something more, I think, to restore the economic strength of our country. Very important is the fact that I think we need to provide jobs for those unemployed. We must do our best to reduce the problem of this retrenchment, because if there are more that are to be retrenched, especially by the small and medium industries, I think that will be will have a very negative impact, I think, on the affected people concerned. So my hope is this, that while we are on the right team, Malaysia Prihatin, as we commemorate our Independence Day under the new just a normal, I hope that the government and the people will be able to work together to achieve all these desired objectives. Of course, the government has a major responsibility to provide for the people, and they have a lot more to do in terms of helping the people to cope with their economic hardship. But at the same time, I think the people that themselves must also do their part to show their patriotic spirit at this time. Now, what do I mean? What I mean is this, that if Malaysians themselves are able to comply with all the SOPs to prevent a further spread of COVID in the country, then that is the best way to ensure that we will not be able, that there will not be another lockdown, because we know we had this lockdown before and it caused so much hardship. So to prevent a lockdown, I think the people must ensure that they comply with all the SOPs, and I think when they are in crowded these places, they must make sure they put on their face masks, they must use hand sanitizers, they must wash their hands, and these are the things that we hear daily from the Director General of Health. But what I would like to emphasize is the fact that now, how do we show our patriotism to the country? There are many ways. For example, we fly the flag, we fly the Jalur Gemilang. That is a way of showing our love, for the country. We remember Hari Kemerdekaan. Number two is, as I said, we can show that we can help the country by means of complying with the SOPs, in order to prevent a second wave of COVID-19. And by doing that, we will be showing an excellent example that we are this patriotic. We are patriotic to the country. We love our country, and that's the reason why we want to comply with all the SOPs to prevent a second wave of COVID-19. So I would like to wish all Malaysians from all over the country, from different parts of the country, I'd like to wish them happy Independence Day. Saya nak ucapkan selamat menyambut Hari Kemerdekaan ke-63, dan saya memang berharaplah bahawa sungguh pun kita akan menyambut Hari Kemerdekaan di bawah norma yang itu baru. Tetapi saya itu rasa bahawa sekiranya kita dapat bersatu pada satu saat di mana negara kita menghadapi pandemik COVID-19, saya percaya bahawa kita boleh menghadapi satu cabaran yang amat getir ini. Sekian, terima kasih.
There you go. Thank you very much, Tan Sri. Happy Independence Day to you as well.
Happy Independence Day, sir.
Thank you for your time once again. All right, there you go, folks. Remember, right, as Tan Sri mentioned, do your part for the country, love your country, and also by loving your country, it also means you do your part.
Take care of yourselves.
Mask up.
Take care of your families. Follow all the SOPs and have yourselves a happy Independence Day. I know programming will be slightly different this year. There won't be no parades, but of course we've got some pretty cool stuff happening on all our national broadcast stations. So tune in. Selamat menyambut Hari Kebangsaan 2020. Malaysia
Yes.
Prihatin. I'm Terence Das.
This is Stefan Munch saying, see you guys.
It's been the Joseph and Moon Show. Thank you for watching.